All right, guys, today we're going to master a track from my fiance, DeyDeyDeville, you guys know her as, and I'll leave a link below to her channel so you guys can subscribe and listen to our other mixes. So in this master, we're going to focus on making it wide and taking out some of the mud in the middle. So the real secret is just boosting the side image. So first, let's listen to it and see how wide it actually is. And then I'll show you guys what it, let's pull up some plugins here.
What's behind your eyes?
Now we're going to pull it to mono so you guys can hear how much information we have in the mono. So mono is usually where the mud tends to get muddier. So we're going to listen in mono so we can hear any overlapping.
So I can touch your
So what I'll do to clean some stuff up here is we're going to add an EQ, a channel EQ in Logic. In Logic, you can also do this in FL. You have to switch it to mono mode though. So let's switch this to mid only. So we're only affecting the middle signal. And basically, it's not that it's clashing or that it's bad. It's that it's just the style for this genre is they tend to make it really lightweight around like 200 to 400 hertz. That's where that respace is sitting. And that will also clear some room for the kick. So I'll boost it where I hear it. This is the zone where that kick is fighting with the respace. Okay, so we're gonna reduce this so that our ear can create a separation between the two sounds. So we're trying to find the crossover point between those two sounds. See right here, you hear the respace, and then here you hear the kick. So it's somewhere in between here. We're gonna cut this so that our brain can determine and distinguish the difference between the two. So somewhere around here. All right, so let's cut this about 2 dB, 3 dB. So now your ear can hear the difference between that respace and that kick now. Now I'm also gonna boost to compensate for the fact that we cut out a lot of that res. So let's boost the other side of the respace. We may pull this back later, but I'm boosting it now. Let's boost up the lows a little bit. Let's boost up the highs. Now, usually I don't boost, like for something I want to enhance for the entire track, I'm not usually boosting only one signal. So actually, let's pull these back. Let's use a different EQ to do these adjustments so that we can affect everything and not just the mid signal. So let's get out of mono here. And let me show you guys the side image here. So if you didn't know, FabFilter allows us to hear the difference. So we're just gonna make a band to target all the frequencies. We're gonna switch the expert mode on. We're gonna turn it to click here. We're gonna go to side, and we need to turn this fader to the right so that it only solos on the side. And then we're gonna hit audition. So now we can hear the stuff that's on the side of the track, meaning the difference between your left and your right ear. So now I'm hearing all the information on the side, and now we can make decisions about the side image separately from the middle signal. So let's go to side only. And we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to see where do sounds stack up and kind of, they call it masking, but where do they basically muddle up to where you can't distinguish the difference between two sounds. So we hear that woo, and then we hear a sawtooth. So let's figure out the in-between of those two. So 200 is where that respace lives. 500 is where that other sound lives. So let's cut in between. This will help separate those two. All right, so now let's undo the auditioning. So let's just play it before and after. Here's before. And just focus on the stereo width and the separation of sound. All right, now let's turn the EQs on. Listen to that Reese jump out. Okay, so let's turn these off again, just so you guys can really hear the difference. as you guys can hear, that respace feels like it's sitting on top because now it's not being masked or confused with other sounds. Okay, so that's what our ear kind of struggles with in terms of frequency content, is just similar sounds and distinguishing the difference between the two. So now we have the separation completed. Now let's worry about dynamic before we start cutting dynamic with compression and all this. Now usually it just depends. I might add dynamic after I compress. It just depends on the sound. Actually, before we even get to all those things, let's pull up. I'm going to use the tool I actually use, which is the MD4 HD. I learned about this from Mixbus TV. It's really, really, really good. I'm learning so much about it every single time I use it. So we're going to put this on mid-side mode. And this is a quick way for me to boost the width of a sound without doing too much. You guys can use stuff like Isotope Ozone Imager, or I think, yeah, that's the one. Let's just see what that would sound like actually before we get into this one, just so you guys have an idea of, and there is a free version of this called Imager by Isotope, or at least it was free. So here's the Imager. So I'm just going to show you guys what I might do with this tool. Now here's the caveat, is we want the bass to be wide in this genre. So most people tell you to pull your bass to mono. But the problem is with this genre, the bass kind of exists on the side. So I'm going to pick everything below 80 hertz and we're going to pull that to mono. So the sub is centered, but then the bass core area from about 100 to 400 hertz, depending on where your bass is, that can live on the side. So we're going to widen that, and everything else can just be widened. So let's do it before and after.
Let me in so I can touch your so I can touch your
So it definitely makes it wider, gives it a little more brightness. But the thing is, it dramatically shifts the way we kind of perceive the shape of the sound. So I don't like to use that plugin specifically anymore. My new thing is using either a side EQ or a mid EQ and just adjusting the side volume, just as a whole.
Let me in so I can touch your
Let's also go back to that mid EQ. There's another frequency I want to tackle. Somewhere around here. Yeah, I want to really soften that kind of second and third harmonic area because it tends to cloud up a lot of that zone tonally. So I feel like we have that under control. Now we can adjust the side. Now I can still go back to the side EQ and make even more adjustments. So let's say it's too cloudy on the sides. The cloudiness usually occurs from 100 to 300 hertz. It's that boxy tone. But remember, we need part of this for the bass to exist. So if we just cut it, we're not going to have any respace left. So this is one of those things where we're overriding the producer's perception. So they may have created the beat around this, but the mix reference that they send me, the mastering reference doesn't have any of that frequency in it. So they're creating one way and they may build their whole track around that. So if we remove it, it might kill the entire track. So here's where it becomes a tug of war between the producer and the mixer or mastering engineer's intent or perception, I'd say, because now we're reducing the original intent behind that respace. So you basically, as a mixing engineer, you just have to identify where you're making these dramatic changes to where it completely changes the original mix, because then you have to explain to the person who made the beat why you're doing it. And in this case, I just showed you guys, well, you guys didn't hear the references, but the references, they're very wide, they're thinner, but they have sub on the side. Okay, so it's not this like on the side, eating up all that space. let's take all these plugins off and let's see the before. So the mud is coming from the fact that you have a respace that's so widely spread. It's taking up all the room in the middle, the side. So that sound of the respace is eating up the majority of this track. So we have to sacrifice the respace existing in certain pockets of the track in order for the track to even feel like it can be heard outside of the respace. So that's a fundamental production thing that has to be done in production. We also have another EQ here. Let's unlink these. So we've cut pretty significantly. I think I cut 6 dB around 200 hertz. That's how much that brace space was taking up space. Another thing I like to do with this plugin is do mid-side EQ. We can do parallel mode or normal mode. Now for EDM, you can get away with normal, meaning every time this compressor triggers, it lowers the center image and it makes the stuff on the side feel wider. That's what creates some of that movement as well. So we're purposely compressing the middle signal. Now we could also, change these modes from parallel to try different modes. It won't give us as much of a dynamic, but let's try it. So let's try out the different modes here. So notice we're dramatically pulling it down these entire zones. It's because these instruments are just way, way, way too crowded in these zones. So we can sacrifice in one stereo positioning while still keeping it existing in the mid. So as you guys can hear, this whole area from here, the sawtooth choice from the Reese bass, these are very dense and loud in the mix. And I can't undo the mix, so we're gonna have to pull these down. Notice also too, I've reduced the mid signal to rebalance the side image. And I've noticed in this genre, they tend to have, again, like I said, the sides are just super wide. It's not because they've done some magic. It's simply because they've turned up the side image versus the middle signal. Now, before I push this into this limiter, I want to try another plugin called Faster Master. Now, this is by, I believe, David Guetta and Nick Romero, if I'm not mistaken. And Nicky Romero. So basically, this last time I used it, it was very aggressive. So I couldn't use it for my hip hop track. So I want to see if it works on this type of track. We're just gonna hear it turn on and off now. Turn your volume down just in case, guys, because I don't know how loud this is gonna get. Actually, I'll do it for you guys. Let's turn this down. All right, now this is on. We got to analyze the track. So it's going to read it just like Isotope would read it. And now beware, this could get super loud. I don't know. I'm going to turn down the master fader because I already know it's about to be super loud. All right, so it's about to change by 8 dB. That is literally insane. Hold up. So even, I do like their mix actually, sounds really balanced. So look at what they did to the mix. So they basically boosted, the crap out of the highs. So it's rebalancing those lows. And it's even cutting sub frequencies so that it targets the fundamental frequency, which is the Reese base sub. So it's boosting back 200. So that's interesting. And it has a transient shaper in here, compressor. I don't know what this does on the screen. Stereo spreader. This tends to widen those low mids, pull in the high mids, and then widen the highs. Interesting way to go about it. And limiting, I don't know what this is doing, but I assume it's just pushing it louder. Now, the thing is, though, this is way too loud for what we're doing. If I turn this back to 0, I might blow my headphones off. Let's do it before and after. Here's before. Here's after. I do like it. Some parts are a little sharp, that like sound, for example. Let me turn it on and off, because again, we're comparing their end stage of our master to our 20% of the master. So we're not done all the steps yet. But I guess what we could do is leave it here, and I'll add more plugins to the chain. And then at the end, I'll try to compare the two. So that I think that's what we'll do. But it does sound nice, though. Let's bypass their stereo shaping. So we lose a little stereo width, in my opinion, but it does sound good. All right, so I'm just giving you guys the mindset. So at this point, you guys are going to be battling with pushing a track to a super loudness point or just getting it to where it needs to be. So I like to not always push everything to super loudness. It does not always need loudness all of the time. So we have a compressor already. What I'm going to add here is an expander. So we have our compression. Let's add an expander now. The expander adds more movement to the track. We can also add loudness with the RMS mode, but let's just, basically, I just want this to hit somewhere around 2 dB. And it's on soft clip mode, so it's adding harmonic content if the track needs to be louder. Now it's working to, you know, something like an ozone maximizer. This has what's called upward compression. So it's pulling up those low volume things and making it more even. We can also limit, and we could also add the limiter here. Now, the references I was given, the kick was very different. So we have to either decide to basically sound design the kick by taking out some of the upper harmonics around. Usually it's 500 hertz that has that knock of the kick or that crunch. So this will make it sound like instead of just taking out some of that 500. But now we're sacrificing the Reese existence. This is why mixing and production have to be like locked in, or else we're gonna have to make compromises here. So now we're losing the Reese bass in the middle to prevent the kick from sounding like a trap kick. So just to show you guys, I'll turn it on and off. Listen to this frequency. Okay. Sound. That's what's making the kick sound like a trap kick. Now if we do -3, it doesn't have that sound anymore, so it's not perceived as a trap kick. But now we're losing, again, like I said, the Reese in the middle. right, now we're going to push it for loudness. I'm going to push it into this compressor. So here's before our EQ decisions, you know, clearing up that side image. Here's before. Listen to how heavy it sounds. Here's with the EQ, and it sounds very lightweight. So these are, again, I'm using the references. So that's how the references were mixed. So I like to listen as I make these EQ sweeps. So now I'm doing creative sweeps. I'm choosing if I want to reduce the Reese or boost it in the sub area. I'm just going to sweep around until I find the energy we want. We're definitely trying to avoid the heavy weight of the sound though.
What's behind your eyes? What's behind your eyes?
So now I'm going to use the DS1 to try to figure out how to hold the sound together because we made a lot of dynamic changes.
What's behind your eyes?
I'm also going to try a technique where we stereorize a specific frequency range to create a left-right stereo delay. This is very different than just simply widening. This is creating a left and right ear difference, timing difference. See how all the weight of the track feels like it's on the side image. So I'm just debating how much energy or weight I want on the side image because it's eating up a lot of that room.
What's behind your eyes?
So now the main two things I'm listening to is the weight and the stereo image of the track. So I'm trying to create a stereo image that has pretty much everything on the side except for that low mid range. But it's tricky because it changes the entire like track's energy. So I'm trying to balance it. So this is where I'm just fine tuning and experimenting as I listen. There's no right or wrong thing to do here. Another kind of trick is when you compress the entire track or even compress the sides, you pull that energy to the center. So whenever the left and the right ear hear the same exact thing, that's basically what compression's doing, is making stuff more similar in volume. And so if we compress the side image enough, it will make that thing sound centered. So I can kind of control the stereo image through a multi-band compressor like Pro MB. So I'm trying to find the areas where the track is just getting too clouded on the stereo. I think it's this range here from about 200 to 1000, but let's sweep around because it also could be this range right here. We just have to hear it in context. So you guys can't hear what I'm doing, but I'm listening in mono. I guess I could just turn this plugin on. So what I'm doing on my monitor controller is turning the mono mode on, because now when I hear, when I collapse the stuff on the side to the center, does it get cloudy in the middle signal? That's basically what I'm trying to do here. So it sounds good. Some frequencies that are probably need to be more on the side, but I do like pulling the majority of the highs into the mid, or compressing the sides. But I also want to try the opposite, which is to compress the lows and see if that changes the sound. So this feels more like the reference to me, this adjustment here. So it is pretty heavy-handed, but you guys have to realize the reference that I heard is... Okay, so we're pulling down 6 dB in range. Ratio's at 7.49 to 1, which is pretty much almost limiting at that point. And what else? We're only compressing the side image. So again, here's the side image. Again, listen to how much weight is in these sounds. So it's about 3 different things trying to occupy that weight zone, and it just causes the ear confusion. So we're pulling those, again, more centered. Now, it may seem dramatic, but remember, we're doing this at the beginning of the chain after we've already made all the decisions for the other stuff. So it looks dramatic here, but we compensate for a lot of this stuff with all these EQ decisions later. So to my ear, the final step here is this loudness. Here's where we're going to add a clipper. Now, gold clip is the most universal clipper, okay, without sounding too hip hop or too pop. This one just sounds pretty nice. So we're just going to turn the gold parameter up, put it on unity mode. We don't want to overly saturate because that will introduce more frequencies that we now have to clean up. So the gold knob is basically a saturator. All right, so to compare, what we need to do is duplicate this audio to another channel and duplicated everything. So let's just turn this stuff off. Actually, here's how we're gonna compare. We're gonna do one chain that has everything up to the faster master, okay? And let's take off the Pro and B because that wasn't on at the time. So let's turn that on, boom, boom, boom. And then we'll solo each one and see which one sounds the best to our ear, okay? And let's also do one that just has a more simplified mastering, which is just if somebody slapped on a limiter, because sometimes the limiter does sound good if you just slap on a limiter. So let's try that for this track down here. Let's mute up. And I guess the only thing it just needs is a little EQ. So let's turn the EQs on. The reason I'm doing different versions is so that, you know, when I send this over, send it back to her, she could hear the difference and understand, like, you know, where we started from where we came. And also too, I usually might add the reference track, but I'll do that separate. So as we can hear, that one's very cloudy sounding. The original has the most dynamic, but it just holds a lot of weight in that track. I'm not mad at the faster master. It's a little bright. I might pull back some of the EQ, but I'm not mad at that. Master, it sounds kind of dope. Now ours is not as loud, clearly, but it definitely has a little more thought to it.
Go
Still feel like we can EQ, touch up a little EQ, probably around the center, but let's just do a general EQ. So somewhere around like 800 hertz, we could potentially boost. There's like a hole in the mix somewhere. Just gotta figure out where. So the hole is this area, the 200 to 500, but again, if we add that back, it adds too much weight to the entire track. And because I don't have full control over the mix, there's a synth that goes and it's super loud. It just simply needs to be turned down. It's just too loud, but I don't have the stems. So we got to do what we can with what we have here. One solution is we could try a dynamic EQ, try to see if we could target the frequency that's harsh, and then only when it gets harsh, we could pull back using the dynamic EQ. So I'll sweep around and see if it's one frequency range, but it seems like a very wide sound crossing a lot of frequencies here. So listen to that sound. So I'll do a before and after. So listen to how aggressive it is without EQ. Now let's turn it back on.
What's behind your eyes?
Now I'm just messing with the compressor to get different tones out of it.
What's behind your eyes?
That compressor does a nice little volume turning down so it grips the ear. It's almost like adding a little powder, I guess, to the mix. I know it doesn't make any sense, but. So what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll solo each mix here. Hopefully I don't play them all at once by accident. So let's solo each one. Let's start off with let's reorganize these. Let's do the original limiter with the EQ. This one was faster master, boom. And then we'll do, why'd these get renamed? I guess I must have control Z. So let's go all the way back and solo these.
What's behind your eyes? Let me in so I can touch your head.
Whoa. I knew I was gonna press a button that was gonna do that. My bad, y'all. I was trying to solo individual one. Okay, I just didn't know the shortcut. You have to hit Alt. My bad, y'all. Sorry if I blow a speaker. So let's do this again.
What's behind your eyes? Let me in so I can touch your head. Say you want it, but you don't. Just relax and let it flow. I know that you got something you won't show. So I gotta let you go, go, what's behind your eyes? Say you want it, but you don't. Just relax and let it flow. I know that you got something you won't show. So I gotta let you go, what's behind your eyes? Let me in so I can touch your head. Touch your
All right, so it could use a little automation on the high EQ because at the end, the high EQ on my mix sounds nice. And there's certain areas where it could be boosted more. Like right here.
What's behind your eyes?
So what I like about each one, the original, that has the original intent. The limiter plus EQ is heavy on the kick, and she specifically says she doesn't want the kick to be super heavy. But it creates this like push-pull effect that I do like about it. The faster master version is very, very, very bright, and it does have more movement. Because I think it compresses the lows harder. And then my mix is more... creates a little more evenness, in my opinion. There's less like bias to one side or another. And could we push this even harder through another limiter? We could, but that's where we're getting into territory of like too much loudness. So I'll send these 4 copies over, get some reviews, and then fix whatever nuance thing needs to be changed. But this is why I'm having 4 different versions so they can hear the difference. All right, y'all, subscribe if you're new. Go to busyworksbeats.com/premium to learn more about busyworksbeats.com. Peace out, guys.